Well, some newly released documents are putting U.S. President Donald Trump's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein back in the spotlight. In one of the newly released emails, Epstein alleged that Trump knew about the girls. The White House is pushing back and calling the timing of the release a distraction technique.
These emails prove absolutely nothing other than the fact that President Trump did nothing wrong. It is not a coincidence that the Democrats leaked these emails to the fake news this morning ahead of Republicans reopening the government. This is another distraction campaign by the Democrat and the liberal media.
Dave Leventhal is a contributing editor at Notice. So Dave, what's your takeaway from this latest piece of information about the Epstein file?
This is just simply the situation that some people thought was going to go away and fade away into the darkness and be superseded by the government shutdown and all of the other drama that we've had here in Washington, D.C. for many, many months. But plenty of other folks, including many of us in the news media, knew that it was going to come back in a fury. That's what we saw today. And these emails, and there are several of them that specifically note Donald Trump, name Donald Trump, mentioned Donald Trump in the context of the sexual scandal that Jeffrey Epstein that ended him, is back in the news for all the wrong reasons.
And never a good day when you have to make this defense from the White House podium in the briefing room, but here we are. U.S. President Trump, he has pushed back, calling it the Jeffrey Epstein hoax, as well as a deflection technique from the Democrats, and that only a very bad or stupid Republican would fall into that trap. What do you make of this response from the president?
Well, it was a certain Republican back in 2024, and that would be Donald J. Trump himself, who promised the release of the so-called Epstein files. This was something that not only Donald Trump, but so many people around him, including high-profile officials in his current administration, were saying for, in some cases, years, information that had to be put out in the public domain, that had to be released so that everyone could see it and know what exactly Jeffrey Epstein did or did not do, and the powerful people in Epstein's orbit did and did not do. But here, flash forward a year later, and Donald Trump has been on the defensive for months now, saying there is nothing to see here. We do not have to release any files. This is a distraction. And that's been pretty consistent coming from Trump and the White House for the past many months. But there continues to be just a drumbeat and a drip, drip, drip of information. The latest, of course, coming from Democrats in the U.S. House right now that have released at least some aspect of these Epstein files into the public domain, and it's pretty darn controversial, to say the least, here in the U.S.
Right. It's a small number of emails from thousands of documents, right? So this is one of the things you always need to be careful of in terms of understanding the context. But the oversight Democrats say these emails raise serious questions about Donald Trump. So maybe that's true, but none of that seems to affect Trump's standing with Republicans. I mean, how do you think it's being received by the people who supported him?
With many Republicans and most Republicans, in all fairness, but there have been a number of other Republicans who have sort of been caught in this bizarre situation where, on one hand, they want to support Donald Trump and they want to back Donald Trump in whatever it is that he's doing, but on the other hand, have been, in essence, the stokers of conspiracy and conspiracy theories about Jeffrey Epstein and all of the people who they believe are going to be at some point revealed as being in not only his orbit, but being complicit with his crimes and the sexual abuse that he led up over many years. So ultimately, this is something that Donald Trump really kind of can't wriggle out of this one easily because of the fact that he has been on both sides, both the, hey, we got to release these documents, and now, no, we got to not release these documents side. It's a pretty awkward situation, which is why we've had this in the news for so many, many months in the course of 2025.
So the messages that were highlighted today, they're part of a batch of 23,000 documents. I mean, what else do you think can be taken away from this massive amount of information? I mean, the volume doesn't necessarily speak to its value, but it's a lot of stuff that's going to come out.
It is, and there will be individual lines that are cherry-picked out of the voluminous amount of documents that we have, but those lines, you can call it cherry-picking all you want, but it is Jeffrey Epstein talking about Donald Trump. He's not talking about any of the other millions of people who live in the United States. He's talking about the president of the United States before he became president of the United States, going back many years. So it really just speaks to the question of, what did Donald Trump know? What did Donald Trump do? And what was exactly was the ending of the relationship between Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein, who, let's remember, they were close buddies. They were good friends. They hung out a whole lot. And Donald Trump has said and maintained for many years that, hey, once he found out that Jeffrey Epstein was, in his words, a sleazy guy, he kicked him out of his Mar-a-Lago club. He ended that friendship, and that was the end of it. But there have been many, many questions, especially coming from Donald Trump's detractors, as to whether Donald Trump is telling the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so to speak.
Right, but he did kick him out of Mar-a-Lago, I think, because he was trying to hire masseuses away, not necessarily because of a moral objection, or at least that's not been the stated reason at any point. And look, they're trying to shift the focus away, the White House is, from Epstein. But now with the swearing in of the latest member of the House, they have the signatures, they have to force a vote on releasing everything. And I know that still has to go to the Senate, and that still has to go to the White House, should it go through that process. But the fact that Congress, which has largely been letting Donald Trump do what he wants on things like tariffs, as we know in Canada, which is congressional jurisdiction, they may very well vote on this, right? I mean, how likely do you think that they force the vote and that it might go against Trump's wishes here?
Yeah, this is a technique called a discharge petition. And without boring you of the procedural and legislative details of all of this, it basically means that in the U.S. House of Representatives, the House of Representatives members have gathered enough votes to say, hey, it doesn't matter what the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, wants to do or not do. We have enough votes to force an ultimate vote on whether to release these files. And as you just mentioned, that would not be the end game. This would have to go to the U.S. Senate. And Donald Trump ostensibly would have to sign this if ultimately there is legislation passed to release the Epstein files as they are, that are being held by the U.S. government. So many, many other hurdles, and we're probably looking until December before any of this would fully come to fruition. But it is an incremental step that is incredibly important, because what else is happening today in the United States? Well, it looks like we're going to end the government shutdown that has been the longest government shutdown in the history of this nation. And yet here we are talking about the Epstein files. So that kind of speaks to the notion of the obsession that we have in the United States, and worldwide for that matter, about the Epstein files and what exactly this means for U.S. politics and beyond.
Right. Yeah, but just as a final point, I mean, Epstein, you had QAnon, you've got Pizzagate, right? Like this sort of dark, deep state conspiracy stuff has just been such a core part of so much of American politics the last number of years. And often with the conspiratorial mind, when they're presented with evidence that disproves the conspiracy, they tend to just expand the conspiracy. Oh, you're telling me that, you must be part of it. You know, so if this becomes a vote that then the White House and the Senate have to try to shut down, that's a real problem, potentially, with some darker parts of the MAGA movement.
And whether it was President Barack Obama's birth certificate,
Right,
or the stealing of the election in 2020, or the forces, the true forces behind the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, Donald Trump has been an instigator. Whether you love him or not, it is just a matter of fact that he has been an instigator of conspiracy theories. So the Epstein files, and whether a bunch of Democrats and liberals were all tied up with Jeffrey Epstein, this is something that Donald Trump not only has been open to and invited, but has pushed. And again, his key supporters, including Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of the United States, and Kash Patel, the FBI director, Dan Bongino, the Deputy FBI director, are voices that have been in that chorus of the Epstein grand conspiracy. So for Donald Trump to do a 180, turn around and just say, there's really nothing going on here, that has been difficult for many of his supporters to swallow. And some at least have been asking the question, well, Donald Trump, what is it that you are hiding here? Not many, but enough where this is still a thing.
Dave Leventhal, fascinating, sometimes unsettling time in the United States. It's Dave Leventhal, a contributing editor at Notice. Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.